Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are learning Daf Shevui for Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Nun Chet, page 58. And the Gemara, as you know, has been continuing on for several dapim, and we're going to continue on for quite a while with stories and halachot about Jewish consumption of wine that either comes from a non-Jew or was touched by a non-Jew. And I thought I wanted to go over with you today some of the questions that you can see really the Amoraim themselves are divided about. They don't know the answers. The Talmud gives contradictory information on this, and the disputes continue really through the Middle Ages until finally there was some sort of a decision made on how to treat some of these issues. And I think what I want to do is portray this to you as the prohibition coming from two different places. One is really what I would call its Avodah Zarah roots, or maybe even three places. Let's be accurate here. It's Avodah Zarah roots, right? The notion that wine is a product of idolatry, and therefore wine that may have been libated by a non-Jew should be avoided in the strictest sense. That's probably what explains the original great stringency. However, wine also becomes taboo, and there's maybe two different ways of thinking about its taboo nature. One is it's a way of preventing fraternization. If we want to prevent Jews and non-Jews from fraternizing, eventually even from intermarrying, then one way of doing it is saying that you can't drink together. But there's another element that I think we have to admit to. It's sort of like what I would call the cooties element. The notion that even if we're sure the non-Jews didn't libate it, and even if we're sure that benefiting from such wine is really not going to cause any prohibition, any intermarriage or any assimilation, then still we don't want to drink that wine. We might not want to sell that wine because it's got the cooties. And although we don't want to think of Jews as thinking of the non-Jews as being tamei, impure, it probably comes from that kind of notion, which we do hear about here and there in the Talmud, the notion that Gentiles convey some kind of impurity just by the fact that they're Gentiles or non-Jews. So just a couple of the questions that the Tosfot, you can see the enormous amounts of Tosfot on these pages, continue to deal with, and the Amoraim are already dealing with them. For instance, the question, does wine touched without the intention of drinking it become prohibited to derive benefit from it? If a person just measuring it or falls into it or maybe didn't even have any intention whatsoever, does that create the same kind of prohibition if the non-Jew just picked it up to try to drink from it? If wine that's been touched by a Gentile is mixed with other wine, does all of the wine become prohibited? The question continues to be asked. Is there a higher level of prohibition if the non-Jew touches it with his mouth to drink it than if he just touches it with hand? What if he doesn't even know that it's wine? What if he's just testing to see if it's oil? Those kinds of questions. The most stringent is any kind of touch whatsoever, just like with impurity, renders it impure. If you want unsellable, you can't derive benefit from it, and that's the strictest of all positions. And the much more lenient positions would say, look, well, we're maybe somewhat strict if the non-Jew touched it, if he didn't know that it was wine, if he only intended to measure it, if he didn't touch it with his mouth, for instance, or something like that, then it's less prohibited, maybe even under certain conditions drinkable. So those are the kinds of questions. I think it's helpful to me to think of these prohibitions as coming from different places. The Avodah Zarah side, the Tuma, the impurity side, which I would call the cooties, and the side of preventing fraternization. I hope that's a helpful way for you to frame some of these discussions. Many of the stories here contradict each other, but you can see the Amoraim are really arguing this stuff out too. Good luck.